This is Duke University.
Good morning. How is everyone? Welcome back to Fuqua. I hope everyone had a wonderful night last night. I'm sure that some stragglers will be joining us later in this morning, but we're thrilled. We're thrilled the class of 2020 is joining us on stage. Thanks for being back on this glorious spring weekend. My name is Hank Woods. I'm the Associate Dean for Development and Alumni Relations at Fuqua. I started back in August of 2013, so this is my actual first Fuqua reunion. The good news is I'm pretty accustomed to doing these reunion things. I worked on the university side for the last 13 years. One of the great things about being over here at Fuqua is realizing that the same sense of spirit and fun and camaraderie and community exists here. And I think that's exhibited by the fact that we have more than 530 Fuqua alumni back this weekend, some of which I'm sure are still dragging themselves out of the bed, and just over 800 people in attendance total. So that's a fabulous turnout, and we're thrilled that you all are coming back and celebrating your ties to Fuqua and to one another. So congratulations and thanks for being here. I do want to draw your attention to several events this afternoon that you'll want to make sure to attend. First and foremost, 1:30, we have the Distinguished Speaker Series with Dean Bill Boulding and David Rubenstein. David is the co-founder of Carlyle Group, one of the world's largest private equity firms. He's also the chairman of the Duke Board of Trustees, so you won't want to miss that. That'll be a great occasion here in Janine. And then at 3 o'clock, we have concurrent academic sessions with some of our superstar faculty. First, I want to highlight Shane DeColey, who is our Associate Dean for Faculty Engagement. He'll be presenting on how do your personal traits affect your career and corporate outcomes. I'm sure that we can all learn something from that. Pino Lapomo, Professor of Economics, will present on competitive analysis simulation. And finally, David Robinson, who is the Professor of Finance and William and Sue Gross Distinguished Research Fellow, will be presenting on understanding the performance of venture capital and private equity. It's a fabulous lineup and will hopefully enrich your weekend, so make sure to be there. Before bragging on some of the results of the reunion campaigns that are not quite concluded but are working their way to conclusion, I do want to brag on some of our leaders of consequence and recognize them. We have several members of our Board of Visitors who are here, and I'm going to embarrass them and ask them to stand. Derek Penn, class of 84, and Bill Sheen, class of 84. Is Mike Hemrick? Mike was with us last night. I'm not sure if he's here as well. But anyway, thank you so much for your leadership of the school and your counsel to all of us. We have well over 60 volunteers from other boards and folks who've served on reunion committees that are making the numbers that I'm about to report on possible. So thank you very much for your participation and for really helping us put on what's a great weekend. I want to highlight a couple of attendance milestones, starting with the great class of 1974, who has over 50% of their class here in attendance this weekend. That's fabulous. They were going strong and partying with Bruce Springsteen over at the Washington Duke Inn last night. I also want to highlight the class of 2009, celebrating their 5th reunion. They have 114 alumni back. And the class of 2004 also is hot on their heels in the contest to see who can draw the most alumni back. And they have 95 folks here this weekend, so that's fabulous. I'm going to pick on the class of 74 again because they're leading in terms of annual fund participation this year. Thus far, over 43% of their class has participated, and I'm sure that they're working their way towards at least matching, if not exceeding, their participation goal in reunion weekend, so thank you. I also want to give out, many of you probably know that we actually celebrate class gift campaigns with the students before they leave to hopefully inculcate a sense of philanthropy in them before they walk out the door. And I will tell you, it's amazing to me the success that they have. Thus far, the Masters of Management Studies class is at 93% participation, which is absolutely phenomenal. They're striving to get to 100%, and we are going to do everything in our power to make sure that they can get there. The daytime class and the cross-continent class are both at about 75%, and so they're working towards that milestone as well, so that's fabulous. Many of you know that we have a Team Fuqua Annual Fund Challenge, and Dean Boulding will talk about this a little more in depth, but part of the goal for that this year was to have 200 members of the reunion classes participating in that challenge by giving $1,000 or more personally. The good news is if we succeed at this goal, we get an additional $200,000 commitment from an anonymous donor this year, so it's quite important that we get there. But thus far, we set a goal of trying to reach 200 donors in the reunion classes, and as of this weekend, we've surpassed 150. We certainly hope to narrow that gap by the end of the weekend even further. And last but not least, on the giving front, I wanted to highlight that the reunion classes that are assembled here this weekend have been responsible for giving more than $19 million in Fuqua's $100 million campaign, which is just absolutely phenomenal. So we appreciate your support and all you do to help push Fuqua even further forward. Last, before I introduce Dean Boulding, I do want to thank a lot of folks who make this weekend possible on my staff, the Development and Alumni Relations staff. I particularly want to thank Katie Thomason, who is not here because she's running around making sure that all the details are finalized, and Aaron Gash, who many of you probably know, for putting on a fabulous weekend. And we also have a number of folks around the campus who make such a great weekend possible, so thank you. I want to introduce Fuqua's Dean, Bill Boulding. He's the JB Fuqua Professor of Business Administration. He came to Fuqua in 1984, so he is celebrating a reunion as well this weekend. Not his first. Of course, he gets to do it every year. But Bill's been on faculty since '84, as I mentioned. He's held numerous roles, including Deputy Dean, Senior Associate Dean for Programs, Associate Dean for the Daytime MBA program, and more faculty roles and awards than one could possibly care to highlight, lest the introduction go longer than the speech. Bill became the Dean in 2011, and since then has been traveling extensively to both extend and expand Fuqua's reach around the world and domestically, and he's set the school on a course to great success. We have managed through the silent phase of the $100 million campaign, which I'm sure he will update you, and far exceeded a lot of the barriers that many of folks thought Fuqua could accomplish. Upon his appointment, President Richard Broadhead said of Dean Boulding, Bill Boulding combines powerful idealism about what business schools can do for the world with immense practical skill in executing towards these goals. A great teacher and community builder, he is ideally suited to lead the Fuqua School in addressing the leadership needs of a changing world. Dean Boulding.
Wow, I am so grateful to have so many people here when it's so nice outside. This is really astonishing. And let's just say, if it gets too dull, can we have the young man with the balloon run down here again? So this is just a great weekend for me among a whole series of great weekends, which is to say that serving this community is just an incredible privilege. And I feel like, with all due respect to the people in this room who have all done so many extraordinary things and do such important things in the world, I feel like I have the best job of all of you. And the reason I have the best job is because I'm constantly surrounded by a community that is doing so much in terms of what they're giving back to their organizations, their communities, their families, and that they're really making a difference in the world. And so that is inspirational, and as I said, it's an incredible privilege to be a part of that community, and honestly, it's humbling to be a part of that community. And I sometimes find that I get humbled in unexpected ways when I encounter our graduates in different places in the world. I recently, to give you an example of this, I was recently in Heathrow Airport, and I saw someone at Heathrow who looked familiar to me. And so I went over to that person, and I actually jumped in front of this guy, which I don't recommend in airports. It makes people nervous. I jumped in front of him and said, don't I know you? And he looks at me like, no, you don't. And I said, didn't you go to Fuqua? And he relaxed. He says, yeah, I went to Fuqua. And I said, yeah, you're Jack Michaels, right? Class of '87, I'm Bill Boulding. And he goes, oh, hi, Bill. Yeah, that's amazing that you remember me. I said, yeah, well, I remember you from my marketing class. And he goes, oh, yeah, that's right. And so I said, in fact, I remember that you sat in the middle section, in the back row, the third seat in from the end. And so Jack looks at me and he goes, wow, I mean, you have an amazing memory. I mean, I'll tell you, you know, I have to say, I remember your name, but I have no idea where you sat. So it's not actually a true story, but here's the true part, which is, as I've gone around the world meeting with many of our alums, you would be shocked at the number of people who deny that they ever had a class from me. And that part is absolutely true, and I understand it, though, because there's this thing that there's this coping behavior that people have, which is if you have a traumatic experience, you just repress the memories. And so for all of you who I taught, please, I beg forgiveness. But anyway, it really is a spectacular thing to be in this role and to have all of you join us. We're not in a position that many of our peers enjoy, which is most of our alumni body lives within, say, a 200-mile radius of the school. We have about 10% of our community that lives within that radius, and the rest of it is distributed all over the world. So the fact that you're willing to take the time to come here is absolutely fantastic. The thing that I'd like to do today is just to talk a little bit about what I've been communicating over the past year. And something very interesting happened, and I didn't think about this until last night when some of you were saying congratulations on being the dean. And it's now my third year as dean, but it's actually my first year in the eyes of all of you. And this is something I didn't understand, which was the first 2 years I was dean, I wasn't really the dean because I was on a 2-year appointment. And so when I was given the role, you are now the dean, the search committee has decided you're the dean, then I went through this really awkward period of people trying to introduce me saying, well, he's now really the dean, or my favorite was, he's now a real dean. And so what happened at that transition point was that I hadn't understood that I'd been given a free pass for 2 years. And then it was, okay, if you're the dean, we want to know. We want to know, what is your plan? What is your vision? What are you going to do? And how are things going? And so in response to that, I developed a short story about Fuqua that helps articulate the 3 big things that I'm focused on, the 3 things that are really important to the school and to our future, and it gives a framework for talking a little bit about how we're doing in terms of our progress along those 3 dimensions. If I have time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into one particular area that's going to be the stump speech in the next year's cycle. But what I want to start with is talking about a story. It's a short story. It's not a Russian novel, which is good news for all of you because you do want to get outside today. And there are 3 chapters. And the chapters are ambition, love, and money. And those are the 3 things that really we care about in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. And so let me start with ambition. The ambition is really very, very simple. The ambition is to be the best business school in the world. And it's nothing short of that. It's nothing like we want to be really good. We want to be excellent. We want to be the best business school in the world. But that requires some explanation. Why do we have such a goal? And then what does that actually mean if you aspire to being the best business school in the world? Well, there are really 2 ways of looking at this. One is just from a purely competitive point of view. You look at the business school industry, just like the industries that all of you are in, we're subject to massive disruption. And if we don't have an aspiration to be the best, What's happening in the business school industry is a real shakeout. If you're not one of the very top schools in the world, what you're seeing is applications are falling off the table, and I'll come back to that point. And so just from a purely pragmatic aspect, you need to have this aspiration to be the best, or you're going to be left behind. But the thing that I think is more important is the reason why we want to be the best is because of the opportunity that we have. I passionately believe that business will be the transformational engine of the 21st century. It's going to be through business activity that we solve the huge challenges we have around health. For those of you who saw Joe Swedish yesterday, great example. Challenges around our energy future, challenges around our environmental future, challenges around education, economic development, providing the goods and services that will improve lives, taking people out of poverty, you name it. And business is going to be connecting into those challenges. And therefore, we want to be a business school that prepares people to dive into those challenges in a way that they can do something that can move us in a positive direction. So that's one assertion. That's just a very strongly held belief that that's possible through business. But you have to compare that to a second reality that we face, which is in that environment where we have this opportunity to change the world, the reality is that business leaders have never been held in lower regard. People measure the level of trust that others have in society for different groups in society. And what we've seen is, over the past 5 years, that the level of trust in business leaders has plummeted, down to the level of politicians. That tells you how bad it is. And by the way, I was talking about some of this stuff at the White House last week. I didn't mention that part. But the good news is that this past year, we've seen a little bit of a positive delta between business leaders and politicians emerge. But it's not because business leaders went up in the level of trust. It's that politicians kept going down. Didn't mention that either. And so here's the thing. If we are going to have business as a transformational engine, the only way you can do that is if you have leaders who do engender trust, who are respected, who are credible in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. And if you don't, then how are you going to seize that opportunity that's sitting in front of us? And so my view is that if you put those two things together, that's what keeps us going. There's this opportunity, which really is an obligation for us to make sure that we continue to go down the path where we can produce the leaders like all of you who will make a difference in the world. And when you have that opportunity, when you have that obligation, why would you choose anything other than the opportunity to be the very best? It's too important to say we just want to be okay. And so that's the ambition. Now the thing is, the reason why I say this is one of the big three areas for the school as a whole is that it's not enough for one person to say, well, that's my ambition. It has to be our ambition. Because the reality is we won't get anywhere towards fulfilling that ambition if it is not a shared ambition, if there's not a shared belief that we can actually do that. Because guess what? There's a lot of work that has to be done to get from where we are now, which is the state of the school is good, but we want the state of the school to be great. And it's not going to happen with one person, two people, three people. It's going to happen in classic Team Fuqua fashion, which is all of you are going to share that belief, you're going to share that ambition, and we will work together to make that happen because of this belief that we need to offer that in terms of what we can do for the world, how we can make a difference in the lives of others. So that's the ambition. The reality is, if you are going to achieve that ambition, you're going to have to generate a whole lot of love. I don't mean that in the Led Zeppelin sense of it, for some of our older alums. Love is not a word that we use a lot in the business world. but it is absolutely critical in thinking about what we need to accomplish. That we need to have people love this business school. We need to have them love the business school in a variety of ways. We have to generate love such that people say, that's the place that I want to go for my transformational experience. That this is the place to go. It is inspirational, and therefore I want to be a part of that community. It has to be a place that people love, that when they go through their Team Fuqua experience, that they go, it changed my life. This was transformational. This opened doors and opportunities in a way that could not have happened if I didn't join this community. And so you have to have the love there. And then you have to have the love from the people that hire all of our graduates. The organizations, the companies that hire the Fuqua graduates, they have to think, this is the best place to get the kind of talent that we need to advance our interests in the world. And so you need a lot of love in all of those areas. And so that's our scorecard. That's our love scorecard. And it's fairly straightforward in terms of the metrics that attach to those dimensions. So what's happening in terms of, do people want to go to Fuqua? Well, this is one of the scariest things about our industry right now that I tipped my hand, which is, if you look at what's happened in the last 10 years in terms of applications of business school programs, given the rise of very low-cost global MBA programs and given the rise of very low-cost online MBA programs, what you have seen is that if you are in the top 10 schools, that applications have continued to rise. If you're in the top 15, no, they've started to drop. If you're outside the top 15, they've fallen off the table. And that those schools are, what's the technical term for it, Shane, in a death spiral? Because once you start losing applications, then you start losing your ability to produce the finest graduates. And so this is a scary environment. And the good news is that in that environment, that our applications have been growing at a faster rate than the top 5 schools. And so we're actually gaining share in terms of the level of interest, the amount of love. It's a market measure of love in terms of how people feel about Fuqua. And that's extremely important. This year, we're up 10%. And we have to keep pushing every year so that we hit the point where we're actually getting the same absolute number of applications as places like Harvard and Stanford. Because there's a gap there right now. That's why we're not at that great point, because there's a pretty big gulf between the absolute number of applications that we get relative to, say, a Harvard and Stanford. But the news is good. The direction is definitely in the right direction in terms of people having an interest in coming here. So then, why do they want to come here? The fundamental part of the love that you create is you have to drive innovation. You have to constantly make yourself relevant in terms of the experience that you offer to students. And so here we have made significant ongoing investments in terms of how we want to increase the quality of the experience that we offer and therefore have people love the experience and want to come here. Some of the things that I'll point to in terms of this past year that are very important, we've made big bets in certain areas. We've made big bets in health. We've made big bets in energy. We've made big bets in entrepreneurship. And we've made a big global bet. And so let me briefly talk about how those bets are working out for us. The health bet, despite all of the disruption, or I should say because of all the disruption in the health sector, it is more important than ever that we produce people in that space who can go out and really drive the positive disruption that's needed in that sector. There are massive opportunities in that sector. This year, we have put in new curriculum to strengthen the core of the student experience around health, focusing on the provider side of things to make sure that people understand the point of contact between health delivery and the patient. Because we produce students in the sector who go into pharma, they go into biotech, they go into advisory services, they go into the financing these operations. They go into a wide variety of domains, but at the core of everything they're doing is what is the healthcare delivery? What's happening in terms of our ability to increase quality, lower costs, and drive access. And so we've made major changes there. We've pushed hard for, do we have some MHA alums that are here today? I hope they were here yesterday in force. We've pushed hard to increase our connectivity to that body because they're a very, very distinguished group in the healthcare provider space. The consequence of all those investments is that we have a record number of health sector management students this year. So an all-time high in terms of that program, which indicates another market measure of the level of interest and the quality of what we're doing. In the energy space, we've made, again, here, investments in new curriculum. In energy, we've introduced this year a brand new concentration in energy finance. That sets us apart from any other top-tier school. There is no other top-tier school that allows you to have that kind of focus. Why did we make a bet on energy finance? Well, from our point of view, it's a 3-for-1 deal. After the health sector, the energy sector is the biggest economic sector. That's where you're going to see most job creation, and as a school, we want to follow jobs. We want to prepare the people who are going to be filling the jobs that are going to be needed in the future. And so as an energy play, it makes a lot of sense. Now, all that activity, all that job creation in energy, it's going to come because there is a huge amount of capital that has to flow into a large number of projects that are big oil and gas, shale oil and gas, renewables, alternatives, clean tech, that all of that has to be financed. We have to get capital in the hands of the right innovators. And we have to have people who understand how to manage that capital and run those big projects. And so it's a big play for us in the financial services sector and really the corporate finance sector as well. And then the third thing is, it's a 3-for-1. So the third one is that if you look at this interest that we have in entrepreneurship among our students, the two big areas where they're focused are in health and in energy. And so this is an opportunity to bring in content, exposure, build networks that really add value for all three of those student groups. And so it's been a fantastic innovation. Looking at the student experience, we have numbers that have shown a dramatic increase in the perceived quality of the experience for people interested in that space year to year because of those investments. Third thing, the entrepreneurship bet. So the university as a whole has a big initiative around entrepreneurship. This is a very special time in the moment that we have to think about entrepreneurial activity, to think about innovation here in Durham, North Carolina. There is a book that I talk about at every opportunity, which is called The New Geography of Jobs. It was written by a Berkeley professor. And the thesis of this book is that there are certain areas in the world where you're going to see enormous job growth and enormous economic development. And that the places you're going to see the most growth and development will be the brain hubs. And this book articulates 3 brain hubs in the United States: San Francisco, Boston, and Durham. Not even the triangle, Durham. And so, So we have to recognize that we've been given a gift. That for many years, the business school embarked on strategies to say, we're in Durham, North Carolina. That's not the center of the business universe. Therefore, we need to go to a bunch of other places. But now, all of a sudden, one of the 3 most vibrant hubs of intellectual activity, of business activity, is emerging right here. And so we want to make sure that we seize that opportunity as a way to bring in new students, to create opportunities for educational experiences that will train the next generation of entrepreneurs and innovators. And that is, this is, as I said, a really special moment in time and a really fortunate thing for us that the world has turned in a way that now Durham is hot. The best line I heard about this, so for those of you who are from kind of older classes, you probably remember that your social life was largely over in Chapel Hill as opposed to Durham. But that now, the interesting thing about Chapel Hill is they're in deep trouble. And the best line I ever heard about this is that Chapel Hill is now exploring how can they do what Durham has done? And they're looking into, can we build faux tobacco warehouses? So again, this is the dawn of a new era, and so that connects to what we're doing right here at home that is so important to our future. But in addition to what we're doing right here at home, we are continuing with our global presence. We feel like if you're going to be a great business school, you have to be a great global business school. And so we are continuing with what we've started over the past few years, which is to have a presence in the form of teams that go on the ground in really important regions of the world. And so we now have teams in China, in India, in the Middle East, in Western Europe, in Russia and the CIS, Russia getting a bit complicated these days, and now in Latin America. And so we've just hired our new regional team that's covering the Latin America region. We think that it's very important that we be in the places that are critically important to the world we live in today and who are going to be writing the rules in terms of the world that we live in the future. And so these teams are doing a variety of things that make us better. They're building our reputation around the world because you want to make sure that you attract talent from all over the world. They're building relationships with firms, and so that our students have opportunities wherever they want to go in the world. They're supporting our students because our students now all have opportunities to go to these places as part of their educational experience. And what we've done is by having these teams consistently on the ground, build relationships with the key government and industry leaders in a way that we can put them in front of our students to enrich their educational experience. And we can put our faculty on the ground such that they develop the insights around what is it about this part of the world that's different, that's persistently different, why is it different, and most importantly, despite those differences, how does it connect to the rest of the world? Because ultimately, it's not about being in one place, it's about how we all connect together. And so we will continue with those global activities. The most significant thing that's happened this year is you surely know that Duke has decided to build a campus in China, and that campus will be complete by the coming fall. It's outside of Shanghai. We are currently recruiting students for the first Master of Management Studies class that will graduate from that campus. They'll matriculate, show up here in Durham to begin the program, and then move over to China after the new year, and they'll finish their experience over in China. And so they'll have a dual footprint program. This is an extremely important aspect of building our reputation, of trying to do some things that concretely differentiate us from our peers. The energy finance thing is one example of this is something that no one else has done. Having a campus in China is also something that no other top business school has done. And one of my colleagues who's at Harvard, who is an expert on China, has told me that he believes that because of this campus, Duke will become the #1 school in China that's outside of China. And that's a big deal, because what that means is we've got a presence in the 2 biggest, most dynamic economies in the world, and over time, China will become the #1 economy in the world, and to be the #1 school in that market, that's a huge thing for us. For us to be able to leapfrog Harvard and Stanford and so on is not so easy, but this is a mechanism that will allow us to do that over time. I also find it very interesting that when I go to China these days, that all of a sudden, people are calling me and saying, can we do something with Duke? The top schools in China, the top industry people in China. And so it is already clear to me from just the kind of the day-to-day environment there that this reputation benefit is starting to kick in. So those are things that we've done this year that are really critical in terms of pushing ahead with the innovation that transformed the experience. In terms of one other way to look at the student experience, it would be to say, well, what do your rankings look like? And in terms of rankings, we did something interesting, which was we had a team of BCG analysts do some pro bono work for us. And they looked at the big 3 rankings. And for us, the big 3 rankings are US News, Business Week, and the Financial Times. And they asked the question, as you look at those rankings over a 10-year horizon, what schools have been moving up in all three of those rankings? And when they used the standard of all three, there were no schools, which tells you something about the volatility of these rankings, that they're not all perfectly correlated, and sometimes they do funny things. They then went to, is there a school in the top 20 that is showing an upward trajectory in at least 2 of those 3 rankings? And there they found a school. And that school was Northwestern. I'm kidding. Wow. Dead silence. Whoa. I know how to bring a room down. Now that school was Duke, okay? Just to be very clear. And of those rankings, my favorite ranking is the Business Week ranking, because that's where we look best. And I'm just going to say a couple words about the Business Week ranking, because it's actually a little bit counterintuitive what I'm about to say. If you look at if you look at Business Week, there are 2 things I want to mention. First is, over the last 6 years for Business Week, they've acknowledged that our faculty are #1 in terms of intellectual capital. And so what that tells you is that we have put together an incredible faculty base in terms of their ability to drive the innovation that is of relevance in terms of everything that we do. But the other thing is, in terms of the overall ranking, in the last 2 rankings, we didn't actually go up. We stayed at number 6. So we were 6 and then 6 again. But the thing that I found really positive about this flat result, call me an optimist, but the thing that was very, very interesting is, if you looked at the top 6 schools, the top 6 schools were unchanged. When you went to 7 and below, that's when you saw the volatility. This was the first time in our history where we had gone up to that level in rankings, and then instead of immediately bouncing down, we stayed. We stuck. And who are we sticking with? Well, we're sticking with Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Chicago, Northwestern. That's the kind of company that you would hope to be with. And so my view of this is that really 6 is the new top 5. Okay, moving on to love from employers. This is an area where that ultimately everything that you do has to be of relevance in terms of producing people who have the skills that are needed in the world that we live in today. And the real market test of that is, do people want to hire your students, and are your students successful as they enter into their careers? And here the news is unbelievably good, where we have become, we've changed in a way that is very interesting to me. I've been here long enough, and some of you were here at different eras in the school's history where this will resonate with you. It used to be that some of the so-called blue-chip top-tier firms, and just as an example, a McKinsey or a Goldman Sachs, that they would say, you know, those Fuqua students, they're really nice. They're really good team players, but they're not edgy. They're not leaders. And so we were always on the periphery for those companies, that if someone was really good, they could work their way in, but we were not viewed as a destination by those kinds of companies. And now the world has turned, where all of those companies see that they can get the best talent at Fuqua. So some interesting things have happened because of the increase in terms of, there's fierce competition between McKinsey and BCG and Bain and Deloitte for all the consulting, and Accenture, that what's happened is that as recently as a few years ago, there used to be a $20,000 gap in starting salaries between Fuqua and Harvard and Stanford, and now it's just a couple thousand. And that's probably as good as we want. We don't want to be the highest salary school, because we want to make sure that our students have an opportunity to follow their passion. And that passion does not always lead to high-paying jobs. It may be a passion for doing something in health, in education, in social entrepreneurship. And we've built up an incredibly strong reputation in those areas in attracting students who have those interests. And we want to make sure that we continue to attract them and continue to allow them to follow that passion and never feel any weight on their shoulders of, oh, I've got to go get the high-paying job to make Fuqua look better. We're looking just fine. And so it's been a really fantastic thing to see that our students are now so much in demand. And the list of firms that thinks of us as the best school is growing every year. And so it's across banking, consulting, health, the health domain, tech firms, general management firms, industrial goods, retailers. So what do I mean? So Walmart, John Deere, Deloitte, Apple, J&J, Credit Suisse. These are all big wins to be viewed as the best school in the world. So that's the kind of thing where, going back to the ambition to be the best, you have to increasingly hit that mark, and we are. We now have what I call an interesting problem. The interesting problem is when you look at rankings, the way that rankings are done in terms of employment metrics is they look at jobs at graduation, jobs accepted at graduation, and jobs accepted within 3 months. What's been happening the last couple of years is that we've been tracking in terms of job offers at those points in time, and what's been dropping is jobs accepted. Because our students now have the same kind of confidence as someone who comes out of Harvard and Stanford around, I'm not taking any job, I'm taking the job that is exactly right for me, and I'm confident I'm going to get it, and I'm going to be patient, and I'm going to wait. And so it's made us look more like Harvard and Stanford on that metric as well, which is a little bit tough because it hurts you in terms of how the rankings people look at it, but what underlies it is a very positive message, which is the students know they're good. And they're going to hold out for the best opportunity, which is fantastic because what we're about is providing the transformational experience that allows people to follow that passion. So that's the love part of the chapter, or the story, the love chapter. Which brings me to money. And I know all of you were really waiting for the money chapter, knowing it would be the best chapter. It's sadly the saddest chapter. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes to talk about this. And the saddest part is, the reality is that you can't live on love alone. And that we have to be realistic and recognize that money does matter at the margins. And so what does that mean in terms of money matters at the margins? Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that we have a big resource gap in terms of where we stand relative to our peers. And so I keep talking about a Harvard and Stanford. They have 10 or 12 endowment dollars per student for every dollar we have. So they have a multiple, a 10x multiple. I mean, 1,000%, not 10%, 1,000%. Huge gulf. They're a little bit outliers for different reasons, Silicon Valley and history. But if you look at the other top schools above us and below us, they all have us by a multiple of at least 3 to 1. And that's not a sustainable resource gap if you have this aspiration to be the best in the world. Because ultimately, those resources come into play in terms of your ability to do things with respect to student excellence, faculty excellence, and program innovation. And that's why the timing of this capital campaign is so important, to be able to close that gap to some degree, change that multiple in a way that we can become more competitive in areas where we have to be competitive. Now, I'm going to pick one area to highlight what this really means. Let's talk about scholarships. So the campaign is simple. It's about student excellence, program excellence, and faculty excellence. It's not about buildings. It's not about bricks and mortar. It's all about people. So on the student excellence side, one of the things that I heard loud and clear when I was at the White House was that the business schools have ratcheted up their scholarship dollars to attract the best and brightest and most interesting people. And that is a race where we are lagging well behind. To put it in perspective, if you look at the top schools and you look at their scholarship support, they're at a level where 85 to 100% of their scholarship money is endowed. Ours is endowed at 33%. Now, what that means is, it means a couple of things. One is, this highlights how important annual fund support is, because the way we make up that gap is, we don't just say, oh, it's not endowed, we're not going to give it. It means that we're going to give it, and we're going to use the annual fund support to make that happen. But it also means that we're not giving as much as our peers. Not even close. And the way you can infer this is some interesting ranking data. We're ranked in so many different ways. One way that we're ranked is what is the overall cost of an MBA? And in this ranking, we come out as the third least expensive MBA among the top 20 MBAs, because we have the combination of tuition and a lower cost of living to our advantage. But then there was another ranking that came out a year ago, which was, what is the debt load at graduation? Now here's the thing. Because we don't give much in the way of scholarship money, we have been very creative in putting together loan packages for our students. So for us, financial aid is you can take out a loan. And we're going to make that as easy as we possibly can and as attractive as we possibly can. The consequence of giving less scholarship and being friendlier about loan assistance is that we came out #1 among all schools in debt load at graduation. That is not the #1 ranking we aspire to. For me, that's embarrassing and humiliating that we're #1 there. And so because we had a delta of $1 million in increase in annual fund support, in the previous year, we were able to increase our scholarship support by $800,000. The other $200,000 went into funding those new courses I talked about in health and energy. And that allowed us to drop from #1 to we're #3. Not great, but we're going in the right direction, which is funny, but we want to go in that direction in terms of the debt load. The reason why the debt load issue is so important is it's not that we feel like we're giving people a debt that they can't pay back given their job opportunities. Because people are getting great jobs, getting high-paying jobs. But as I said, not everybody wants to go down that path. And so what we don't want is to create a school that shuts out people who say, I can't afford to go to business school because I know I'm not going to go into a high-salary occupation when I finish. Or I'm not going to be able to follow my passion because I got to pay off that loan. I'm not going to be able to move with this entrepreneurial startup that I have in mind because I got to pay off my loan. That we don't want doors closed, and that's why it's so important to us to see an increase in scholarship support. So that's one example. I could tell stories in terms of faculty and so on, but that's the point I'm trying to drive across. And so that's sad, but I want to give you some sense of promise and hope, which is that the response from the community around the campaign has been phenomenal. And so you look at the $100 million target, we are now at $63 million towards that goal, which has been absolutely amazing because when we started, we were dead last at Fuqua, dead last at Duke in terms of our ability to raise money. And part of that is because we have a very young alumni population. The reality is we have very, very few graduates who are in their 60s and above. And that's the typical giving group that really drives a campaign. But part of it is that we weren't asking. And now we're asking, and the response has been amazing. We're at a point where our progress towards goal is greater than the university as a whole, which is, we're competitive, I admit it. The really interesting thing is that the first year in my job, I spent that year fighting with the university over our ability to set a $100 million target. And they wanted us to set a $56 million target. Because they said, if you look at your past fundraising performance over the previous 5 years, and then we inflate that with the most aggressive number we can imagine, you're going to hit 56 million. And don't embarrass us by setting a higher target that you won't hit. We're past that 56 million, and the campaign runs until June of 2017. And so we're going to hit 100 million. We're going to go past 100 million, but I don't want you to feel complacent about that. I want you to feel motivated by that to join in. And so the thing that I'll close with is phenomenal progress in terms of the campaign. The problem is when you talk about big numbers like 100 million, like 63 million, you often find that people go, well, that's not me. You're talking about people who are giving 6, 7, 8-figure gifts, and you have to have people who do that. But part of what is making this campaign go so strongly is our annual fund support. And there, as I mentioned, we had an incredible increase year to year where we had $1 million increase, and we're driving to increase that level of support this year as well, which is so important in terms of the annual flexibility that we have to add new courses, to add scholarship money, to make changes that really happen on a dime. And the thing that's been driving that increase in support is something called the Annual Fund Challenge. We renamed leadership giving to the Keller Society in honor of Tom Keller, because it used to be called the E.L. Moline Society, and no one really knew what an E.L. Moline was. And I think most people know what Tom Keller is, what he stands for, and how important he has been to the history and the future of the school. So we renamed that society in his honor, and then we had an anonymous donor who said, if you can increase the number of people who will give at the leadership level, which is $1,000 of annual fund money per year, that if you can increase that year on year on year, then I'm going to give you $500,000. And so last year, we hit our target, and this year, we are oh so close to hitting our target. And so what I would urge all of you to consider is, can you step up to that leadership level, which is $1,000. We'll have a table back here waiting for you. We're 100 people away from hitting our target. And it's really important that we hit that target. For us, our fiscal year ends June 30th, so we're getting close to the end, and we're really pushing to make this happen. Once you step up to that level, we really want you to continue, because next year the target goes up. That means we have to retain the people who managed to get to that level and then add new people still. But this is a way to grow the overall base of support for the school. It has been unbelievably successful, and I'm so grateful to all of you in the room who've already stepped up to that challenge, and I encourage the rest of you who can to do the same. Having said that, what you give back to the school is not just money. And for many of you, it may be the case you can't do that. It's, given your circumstance, it's just not in the set of things that you can do. But there are so many other things that you can do to support our ambition to be the best. You can help us attract the best and brightest students and say, you really want to go to Fuqua if you want to fulfill your aspirations. You can be a network of support for our current students in terms of mentoring them, advising them, giving them jobs. You can come back and be a part of the experience that we offer to the students in terms of sharing the wisdom that you've accumulated in your careers. And the thing that you can do more than anything else is you can build our brand. If you think about how our brand is built, I could give 5 speeches a day for the rest of my life, and it would not have the impact that the rest of you will have. Because you will build our brand through all the interactions that you have with others where they say, wow, that is a fine quality human being. That's someone I respect. That's someone I trust. That's someone I admire. And that person went to Fuqua. There's one small thing that's important to make this happen. Fly your Fuqua flag. Don't ever hide that you're a Fuqua alum, because you would be surprised at the number of people who discover, oh, you went to Fuqua too? I had no idea, because they're not flying their flag. And we're thinking of making a flag so you can literally fly your flag. But that's the thing that I appreciate more than anything, which is, as you think about the original challenge that I put in front of you, which is we can change the world, but we're not going to be able to change the world unless we have people who are trusted, respected, and admired, is show the world that you are in that set of people who can make a difference. Thank you all so much.